We're teaching today, continuing on the laws of wealth. Primarily in this video, we're going to talk about the law of conversion, and if we have time, the law of leverage. And we're all doing this in the context of the second X. You've seen in this series of videos this diagram now quite a few times, and we're talking about here the second X, which is really the place where you reach financial independence. If get to quit your job if you want to. This is the place where real financial freedom happens. And so we're discussing the laws that are necessary in order for you to reach or accomplish the second X. And let me just make a quick note in this video. 98% of the people in Western nations never reach what we're teaching as the second X. And so only 1.5% to 2% of the people ever really reach it. And we could actually even look at the top 5%. And most of them, if you took the whole in that 5%, they don't reach this. It's really that top 2% or so that actually reach what we call the second X. So we really are teaching some of these principles and laws to help you know it really is rare air. It really is getting to another level of understanding the secret sauce that it's going to take to be able to produce prosperity in your life, but be able to, we like to call it making sense of making money for making a difference. And so really at the first X, we're working on making sense. Second X, we're working on understanding how to make money. And then at the third X, we're really talking about how to make a difference. And so that's the part that I want to tie in for you again as we get into this series. And today we're going to continue on the laws of wealth. And I want to talk about today the law of conversion. And the law of conversion is a very interesting law that most people never really think about. In fact, let me show you what most people think about. Most people in Western nations are just consumers. We know how to spend money, right? And that which means we don't necessarily know how to save money. So we're taught how to be consumers. And the word consumer comes from the word consume, which means to destroy. And the question is, what are we destroying? Well, if we have a heavy consumer mindset, then we're destroying wealth. We're destroying our power to get wealth that we've talked about earlier in this series, Deuteronomy chapter 8 and verse 18, that says, remember the Lord your God, for it's He that gives you power to get wealth. And so as consumers, we consume our ability. We destroy our ability to be able to get wealth. So we have to have a different mindset. And that's why when I start talking to you about the law of conversion, we're talking about learning how to spend your money, learning how to use your money in a wise way. And we're going to talk about what that looks like here in this particular video. So most people in Western nations are taught how to earn and save, right? So we get a job, that level one or that first X income, right? That job income that we earn, and then we earn, and remember it's taxed higher. So we've been taught how to earn and save. Now, not that many of us actually save money, right? So not many actually do that, but they all, most all who are watching these videos have some kind of what we call first X income. You work and you get paid, but many people are just taught how to earn and save. And the reason that I bring this up is that we've really got to learn how to develop. If we're going to move to the law of conversion, we've got to learn, because the law of conversion, you don't have to learn it. And let's say I want to commend you if you're earning and saving, right? I don't want to criticize that. I want to commend you for doing it. But just earning and saving, what that means, if that's all you're doing, is you're not functioning in the law of conversion, which is one of the laws of wealth that are necessary for the second X. If you're just earning and saving. Now, if you're earning, saving, and now you're starting to invest more actively so that you get the monthly, quarterly, or annual income that we talked about in the previous laws as we talked about the law of income, well, then if you're doing that, then you're having to practice the law of conversion to do that. But let's kind of get into this a little more and kind of look at it. Most people are not taught how to make money or how to live off their money. And this is what we mean. Most are in Western nations are at earning and saving. And until you learn to invest and convert it into other assets that actually pay you, then you're not functioning in the law of conversion. And so most people are not taught how to actually make money and to live off the money that they make. So for example, if I was to ask someone to take $1, here we have a stack, right? But if I was to ask people to take $1 in most Western nations and convert it into $2, they wouldn't know how to do that. Now they know how to earn it, to go work a job and then go spend it. Many of them don't know how to earn it and then save it. So we've got to earn and save, right? We got to get there. But the real secret sauce is learning how to take the money that you now have and be able to convert it. And can you take $1 and turn it into $2? And the answer is most people don't know how to do that. And so I was talking about this law of conversion. I was teaching quite a few years ago now. I was actually teaching on the law of conversion. And I remember a gentleman came up to me that was I'd say he's in his mid-40s when he came up to me, and he said, man, I really like that law you're talking about on the law of conversion. He said, you should hear what my dad has to say about that. And I said, well, tell me about it. He said, when I was a teenager in Kansas living on a farm, he said, all of the boys that were in like the 7th and 8th grade in that rural community that we lived in with a bunch of farmers' kids that were there going to school, he said several of the farmers' kids were starting to get motorbikes. And I kind of here I've got a motorbike, and he said they were starting to buy motorbikes. We're out on the farms. We got a lot of land. And he said, so I came to my dad in the 7th grade and said to my dad, he said, Dad, I want a bike. Can you buy me a motorbike? He said, now back then, those motorbikes, we were buying like a dirt bike. He said, we were buying them and they were about $700 to $800. And he said, so I came to my dad and I said, Dad, would you buy me a motorbike? All my other friends are getting them. And he said, my dad looked at me and just shook his head and said, no, I'm not going to buy you a motorbike. I'm going to buy you a cow. He said, Dad, I don't want a cow. I want a dirt bike. And his dad said, no, we're going to buy a cow. And he said, so what my dad did was he took the same money that I would have used to purchase a dirt bike, and he bought a cow. And he said, now, he bought a pregnant cow. What we didn't know was that when he bought the pregnant cow, we didn't know that the cow was actually going to have twins. And so the cow gave birth, and we ended up with twin calves. And my dad had me fatten both calves up, fatten them up. And he said we took one of the calves and we sold it in about 6 months. And we sold it for like $700 or $800. And my dad took the $700 or $800 from the one calf, and he went and purchased me a dirt bike and paid cash for it. He said, and then my dad looked at me and said, now you have a dirt bike, and we have a cow, and we have another calf that's left over. We got a cow and a calf and a dirt bike. And he looked at me and said, all with the same amount of money. Now that's incredible. And later, not in this video, but later I'm going to talk about the law of acceleration, how you can take the same amount of money, or for illustration purposes, the same bag of money, and move it through different things. But what happens is if you move it through things that depreciate in value, when you purchase them, say like a flat screen TV or something, clothes or something that's going to go down in value, and you don't put it into an asset, the cow turned into an asset because that cow continued to produce calves year after year after year. And the young man's dirt bike, of course, it it got broken up and things over 4 or 5 years. It wasn't worth a lot, but that cow was still producing calves. And so one of the things that I want to show you here when we talk about the law of conversion, it's taking money. It's the same money. It's just the application or the use of the money, and you're able to apply it and actually apply it to things that have real value and that pay you the income when we talked about the law of income. And so that's what we mean by the law of conversion. And so another illustration that I would say is that, let's say you have a teenager that wants a car. Rather than purchasing a car with earned income, purchase an asset that will pay. This is another example. Purchase the asset that will pay the monthly payment on the car. Then you have a car and an appreciating asset, and you have now grown and developed in passive income. It's just another way to think. Proverbs 27 and verse 17 gives us, it's kind of an interesting verse that many times the translators didn't really know how to translate, but this is just Billy's paraphrase. It basically says, the hunter, this is a paraphrase, the hunter who is short-sighted will go, for example, and kill the animal that he's out hunting, and he brings it back to the camp, but he's not willing to roast the meat. In other words, convert the meat into something that's raw, into something that's edible. And the Bible is implying here that he's not being a good steward when he does that. Well, that's what we do when we go make money, for example, and earned income as a job, and then we don't take that money and put it into assets that actually appreciate over time and pay us as we put money in our pocket. And so it's this whole concept of understanding here the law of conversion. Now, one of the things that I like to talk about is these statements here on wealth creation. And this comes from a book called, the title is called Managerial Economics. Now, I'm not trying to sound important. This really came from an MBA book that I had, and it was written by Frobe and McCann in 2010. And here's one of the things they said about wealth creation in this Managerial Economics book. That wealth is created when assets move from lower to higher valued assets. Now, I've already given you two examples of the law of conversion. One, of course, the cow and the calves and the motorbike. Then the other one was buying an asset that would pay, for example, the monthly payment on a car, including the interest, instead of you having to take it out of your earned income. Another illustration I use is with my oldest grandson. And I would take my oldest grandson, for example, to a garage sale and show him that we could buy a wagon. Here's one, and it's missing here the right back wheel. And let's say I found it at a garage sale, and I paid $2 for it just to kind of haul it off for him. And I go and I actually find a wheel at the local hardware store I'm able to put on it that matches it. And then I paint it up, and I buy some red paint and some black paint to really fix it up. And now here I have the wagon fixed up. And now I have a total of about $7, let's say, and our time into the wagon. But then I'm able to sell this wagon, let's say, for example, for $20. Now, honestly, in the day and age that I'm recording this, I could probably sell it for $30. Right? It's a used wagon, but it looks brand new. And so I could probably sell it for a little more, especially with different kinds of social media out there to sell on. For example, different marketplaces that are in social media, you can sell them pretty easy. So here's the point. We took something that was broken down, and in this case of the wagon, we rehabbed it, the law of conversion. We changed it, and we made it into something more valuable. So if you go back here to the definition of wealth creation from an economics book, it literally says wealth is created when assets move from lower to higher valued assets. So I just took, for example, this broken down wagon, and I moved it to a higher valued asset here by putting some sweat equity into it. You do the same thing with pieces of real estate. So the point of this is that you're able to function and take something, for example, that was worth worth a lot less and make it worth a lot more. You can apply the very same principle, as I said, to real estate, and you could take properties that need to be rehabbed, for example, they need to be repaired or painted or whatever, or fixed up, whatever the challenges are, and you make them now worth more, and hopefully with the sweat equity you've put in it, and you were able to buy assets, lumber and paint and those kind of things, and put those into the home to make it worth more, then that's what we call wealth creation. It's actually truly wealth creation. Now, it works exactly the same way, for example, in business. So here's the one lesson of business. It comes from exactly the same book that I just mentioned, and it says this: the art of business. So in other words, when you start doing business, it consists of identifying assets in low-valued uses and devising ways to profitably move them to higher valued ones. And so when we're talking about wealth creation, is that we're right, and we're talking about, for example, taking a business model, as we call it, and putting it around something you want to do, like, as we've already talked about, real estate, then what happens is we're taking assets of lower valued uses, and I'll show you a simple example of that in real estate. Now, I gave you one on wealth creation, which is taking a home that needs repairs and then converting it to one that's much nicer. There's wealth creation there. But another way, I can take a home and buy it in the right location. It's got to be in the right location with the right laws and rules around it. But I can take that home that's being rented on a monthly basis. Say I own it, and I'm leasing it out to a renter on what we call month by month, but I have them sign a 1-year lease, and then they pay me a fixed monthly amount of rent every month. That cash flow comes back to me, but I can also take that same property and even move it to a higher valued use, and I can take that property and put it in what we call VRBO or Airbnb, and I can rent that property on a nightly basis. Now, for example, that property goes from producing $2,000 a month in gross rent to it may be producing as much as $4,000 or $5,000 a month. For example, in the way I fixed it up, it may be producing much more income. That's what we call the law of conversion. I simply took the same house, didn't do anything extra except I had to put some pots and pans and plates and silverware and sheets and towels inside of it, and I converted it to a higher use doing that, and now I'm able to rent it and produce a lot more income. That's what we mean when we talk about the law of conversion. Now, several years ago, my wife and I actually took a Mediterranean cruise. I mean, this was a fascinating, and we were scheduled to go on the maiden voyage of what was called in those days, I think it was called the Emerald Princess. It was on the Princess Cruises, and the name of the boat was the Emerald. And we took a Mediterranean cruise, a 2-week Mediterranean cruise. And we ran into several people on that cruise. You're on a cruise line. And I was kind of wanting to get away, so I'd tell my wife, Miss Becky, I'd say, now don't talk to a lot of people. Be friendly and be kind, but I want to be able for us to be by ourselves. And I remember I went on this particular excursion. We had stayed on the boat for the first 4 or 5 days, and then on the 4th or 5th day, we actually took an excursion to the Amalfi Coast in there in Italy. We were going around the Mediterranean, and we went to, and it was beautiful. I mean, it's just gorgeous. I mean, they got lemons this big around, grapefruits. It's incredible what's there on the Amalfi Coast there in Italy. It's a beautiful place. And so I remember there was the guy who got on the bus, this tour bus that comes off the cruise ship, and he was talking to everybody, and I kind of hit Miss Becky, my wife. I said, now don't talk to him. He wants to get in a conversation. Let's just leave him alone. I was wanting to be by myself. And so I heard him, and he was up there as we got on the road. He started talking about some real estate. He was having a problem with a condo, and I remember talking, I could hear it, and I told her, now don't say anything. So we get off, we go to take pictures, and I go to take a picture of Becky standing on the coast, and he comes up to me from behind, and he goes, hey, let me take a picture of you two. So I wasn't really wanting to talk, but of course, then he took a picture of us and I took a picture of him. And he asked me if I knew anything about real estate. I don't know why he said that because I hadn't been talking, but he asked me and I said, no, not really, not much. And so that wasn't completely the truth, just so you know. But I was trying to avoid a conversation. But I remember this was a fascinating story. And he said to me, he said, I'm just having a problem with a piece of property I have, and I got to find somebody. I figured on this cruise somewhere, I'd run into somebody in real estate or something that knew something, and I'm just trying to find. And so he asked a very specific question about write-offs that he would have on his tax write-offs. And I remember he was standing in front of me, kind of the right, getting ready to get on the bus. And I remember he asked the question with his head about half turned, and I'm standing back here. And when he asked the question, I just automatically responded and said, no, you don't do it that way. You do it this way. And he turned around and looked at me. He said, say that again. And I said, well, no, you don't do it this way. You do it this other way. And this literally happened. This is back in the days when you didn't call from Europe on a cell phone. You just didn't do it. He picked up his phone, he dialed on the cell phone in Europe, in Italy, and called his CPA, and he shoved the phone in my face and said, here, tell my CPA. And so I get on the phone. I don't know who I'm talking to. This was hilarious. And so I told the guy, well, he told me he had this problem. Here's what I would do. And the guy didn't say anything. The CPA didn't say anything. And then the guy who I was with, he got back on the phone. He goes, okay, thanks. He said, you make sure you do that. And he hung up. And he said, I've been trying to figure out how to do that for years. How did you learn how to do that? I said, I've done a little real estate in my past. And so I heard you say it, and I just kind of responded. And so he goes, man, I want to talk to you. Can we have lunch? And so we go to this restaurant, and the good news is there was a lot of people on the bus. And so some of the tables, the one he was sitting at, was filled up. And so he began to tell his story, not to me, but to some of the people around there. And I heard him talking about some of the things that he had. And I wasn't really sure in my mind, other than he called on that phone, how legit he was. And so I hate to admit this, but I kind of avoided him on the cruise. But then one day we just ran into each other. We went on another deal, saw him again. So to make a long story short, we finally had dinner. And he told me this story, I'm talking about the law of conversion. He told me this fascinating story. He said, Billy, I want to tell you why I've had a desire in my life to build wealth and to grow wealth. He was a born-again Christian. And he said, I want to tell you why. I said, why? He said, my dad was a surgeon, a doctor, a medical doctor, a surgeon in a small southern town in Florida. And he said at one time, for example, we owned the biggest home in town. And he said, my dad owned 14 boats. He said, that's his number. He owned 14 different kinds of boats. And he said, if my dad needed money, he'd go to the bank and he'd just get a loan because he was the only real doctor that was there at the hospital, and the banks loved to lend him money. And he said, my dad died at a young age, unexpectedly, with a heart attack. And he said, when he died, we didn't know what he had or didn't have, but he said he left my mother in that prominent town. In fact, he said we had the Christmas dinner at our house, not like the family dinner, but where we invited people from the community and they'd come. We were very prominent in the community. And he said, when my dad died, he left my mother slap dab broke. And he said to me, this man telling me the story, he said, I told myself I was going to take care of my mother and I would never be broke again in my life. And he said, Billy, I own a 12,000 square foot home. He said, I have, at that time, back in those days, he said, I have 13 million cash in the bank and I own 11 McDonald's restaurants. And he was telling me how much each one of these, and he said, what I want to know is how to increase my investments. And I said, listen, we're on a nice cruise. But I said, I want to tell you something. I don't care who's sitting in this dining room with us. You have more wealth with 11 McDonald's and 13 million in the bank than anybody sitting in this room. Because if they have more wealth than that, they're not on this cruise ship, they're on their own yacht. And I said, so if you're wanting to know how to improve it, you probably need to go somewhere else instead of here. He said, I'm interested in investing in real estate and I want to start buying hotels. And he said, can you point me in the right direction? And I said, well, Maybe. And so he started asking me questions. To make a long story short, he told me his journey into McDonald's and how that he was able to buy one McDonald's store, and he had to for a year he had to travel and work at a McDonald's for free. He had to have someone sponsor him. He had to learn how to run a store. Then he had to go to McDonald's. In that time, he had to go to McDonald's University, and he paid the price. And he looked at me across the dining table that night, and he said to me, he said, I will not be happy until I have at least $100 million cash in the bank. I mean, he was consumed. Now, I'm not suggesting in this video that you need to be consumed like that, but I am saying that even though he had the level of wealth that he had built at that time, he was interested in the law of conversion, of continuing to grow and build his wealth. Whatever his motives, good or bad, were, he was interested in continuing to learn at his level how to convert. And so he got into Hilton Garden Inns, and he began to buy. I talked to him about it. We worked on it, different ways for him to be able to do that. He took his daughter and hired her and put it over. She was a dentist, and he took his daughter and put her over that. She had her own dental practice, and he put her in, and today the rest is history regarding what they own and what they're able to produce. Now, here's where the reason I'm telling that story is that he was consumed, for example, with the law of conversion. He wanted to know how to continue to take what he had and be able to convert it in the law of conversion to be able to build wealth. So here's what I'm saying to you today. When we talk about the second X, we're talking about the law of conversion. One of the laws that are important is you have to learn how to take where you are and what you have in money that, for example, you either earn, or what we're teaching you to convert is to buy assets and have those assets produce income in your life. You learn to take this money over here and convert it into assets that then pay you in actual income over a period of time. Those assets continue to go up and they continue to pay you, and that's how real wealth is built. So, hey, I appreciate you watching this video, and we're going to come right back and begin to get into some more laws of wealth at the second X.